Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are plugging into a really specific, maybe even a bit obscure piece of gear history. It's become a real collector's obsession, actually.
Yeah, it's quite the piece.
Our mission today is to excavate this relic that often gets overlooked, even though it shares an iconic family name. We're talking about the MXR Distortion II. Model number MX142.
That's the one. And MXR, I mean, everyone knows them for that little yellow box, right?
Exactly. The Distortion Plus. It's everywhere. The workhorse.
Totally ubiquitous.
But here's the paradox, and you see this come up again and again in the sources we looked at.
Right.
The Distortion 2, it has the same sort of mustard yellow color, the same housing.
Looks similar from a distance.
Right, but under the hood.
Yeah.
Completely different beast. It's like the forgotten sibling, but one with a totally radical, different design philosophy.
Yeah, and it's really important, I think, for you, the listener, to get this distinction right off the bat. This isn't just a slight tweak on the Distortion Plus circuit. Not at all.
It's a whole new architecture.
Completely separate internal design. And what's really fascinating, I find, is its core design goal. For the late 1970s, it was incredibly ambitious.
Ambitious how?
Well, this pedal wasn't just designed to, clip your signal, make it fuzzy. No, it was built specifically to emulate the sound. The enormous sound of an overdriven amplifier pushing a big, powerful 4x12 speaker cabinet.
Wow. Okay, so right out of the gate, they were chasing a pretty complex, almost like a professional studio kind of sound, but in a pedal format.
Exactly. Which leads us to the timeline, right?
Right.
If we're looking at it as history, where does it sit?
Good question. When did this ambitious pedal actually exist?
Well, looking at the sources, the production window seems pretty tight. Roughly 1978, maybe starting late 77 up to about 1984.
Okay, 78 to 84.
And that time frame is crucial because it puts the whole run before MXR eventually became part of Dunlop.
Ah, so it's purely a pre-Dunlop MXR piece.
Correct. And because it was discontinued back then, and critically because MXR Dunlop has never reissued it.
Never brought it back.
Never. It's basically cemented its status. It's kind of mythical among vintage tone hunters.
So that rarity is just baked into its history. Short production window, design basically abandoned by the company later on.
Absolutely. That scarcity, plus its unique circuit, it means when you see one pop up on the used market, you're looking at a premium piece of vintage gear, no question.
Expensive, I imagine.
Oh, yeah. Gear forums, reverb listings, they often classify the MX142 as like a boutique-level vintage MXR. It holds serious value.
Because it's rare and sounds unique.
Precisely. And for the real diehard collectors, the sources also mention this ultra-rare variant, the Black Anniversary Edition. Apparently very sought after.
Okay, a special edition too. So it's rare, it's valuable, and its goal was this huge amp and cab sound. But trying to get that sound with, late 70s analog tech, that must have needed some real innovation inside.
Definitely.
And the first clue, I guess, is when you look at the pedal itself, it's not the typical simple two-knob MXR thing.
Right, not at all.
The Distortion 2, it has 4 knobs.
Yes. Those 4 knobs are the immediate signal. There's some real complexity going on here. You've got the ones you'd expect, sort of. There's drive, that's your gain or overdrive level.
Standard.
Output, which is just the overall volume.
Got it.
And filter, which is basically a tone control like a high-cut filter. Pretty standard stuff there.
Okay, drive, output, filter. But the 4th one, that's the kicker, isn't it? It's labeled resonance.
That's the one. That resonance knob is really the key to understanding the whole circuit, the whole idea behind it.
Right. Now, my first thought is resonance. Isn't that just like a bass boost? How does boosting some low end justify all the hype around this being some landmark design? Seems simple.
But see, that's where digging into the sources gets really interesting. If you connect the dots, that resonance control, it's not just some generic bass boost. It introduces a very specific mid-bass hump. An emphasis?
Specific how?
Okay, the technical nugget that comes up in circuit analyses is this. The boost is centered exactly at 55 hertz.
55 hertz? That's incredibly precise for a pedal back then. Why 55 hertz? Is that number significant?
It is highly significant, and this is where the real cleverness of the design, I think, comes through. The designers didn't just pick 55 hertz out of thin air.
No.
No. As circuit historians have confirmed, 55 hertz is the calculated, get this, resonant frequency of the old Celestion G12M speakers. You know, the greenbacks loaded into tons of classic Marshall 4x12 cabinets back in the day.
Wait, really? So they weren't just sync simulating the amp's electronic distortion. They were trying to model the actual acoustic, the physical behavior of the speaker cabinet itself.
Yes, in analog.
In 1978.
Exactly, in an analog stomp box. Well, it's conceptually way ahead of its time for a guitar pedal.
No kidding. That's genuinely groundbreaking thinking for that era.
It really was. You have to appreciate how forward-thinking that concept was. So the Distortion II wasn't just a simple clipper circuit. It was designed for, like, sonic synergy with the physics of specific speaker cabinets.
So the resonance knob is basically mimicking the thump of a Marshall stack.
Pretty much. It acts like a really specific bandpass filter, tuned right to that 55 hertz point to give you that chest-rattling low-end feel of a specific Marshall cab. And then it mixes that sort of acoustic modeling with the actual distortion circuit.
Okay, speaking of the distortion part, the clipping, the sources also mentioned something about that being unusual too, something about parallel clipping.
Yeah, that's another layer of complexity. It uses two different types of clipping circuits running side by side in parallel.
That sounds complicated, maybe overkill for just distortion. Why do that?
Well, it wasn't really overkill if the goal was to mimic a real high-gain tube amp more accurately. See, a lot of simple distortion pedals use symmetrical clipping, chops the top and bottom of the waveform evenly.
Right.
But many classic tube amps, especially when cranked, exhibit asymmetrical clipping. Different stages click differently. So by running two different clipping circuits in parallel, the Distortion II could achieve a more complex, richer harmonic sound.
Ah, so it breaks up in a more warm, maybe more responsive way.
Exactly. More like the interaction you get between preamp and power amp tubes really cooking. Less sterile, more organic feeling.
Okay, so this whole design philosophy, modeling the cab resonance, complex, parallel clipping it, was all about sounding massive, complex, like a full rig in a studio.
That seems to be the driving goal.
And that ambitious goal, it must tie directly into its reputation, the whole lore around it. Like those famous claims about Siamese Dream.
Oh, absolutely. That unique voice, that specific goal of replicating a huge stack sound, it naturally appealed to players looking for those really big, high-fidelity distortion tones.
The Smashing Pumpkins connection.
Right. Modular grid, tons of gear forums. You see the claim repeated. That the Distortion II was used by Billy Corgan on that massive Smashing Pumpkins album from '93, Siamese Dream, specifically for some of his lead distortion sounds.
That definitely fuels the mythos, especially for alternative rock fans. Of course, we should always mention impartially that claims like that need caution unless the artist confirms it directly.
So always take those with a grain of salt.
But still, the fact that this specific pedal is linked, even anecdotally, to one of the most iconic, high-gain, sort of big muff-adjacent albums of the 90s, that says a lot about its perceived power.
It really does speak volumes.
Okay, so if the goal was modeling a huge cabinet, they needed complex electronics inside. But sometimes complexity, especially with 70s tech, comes with downsides, right? Noise, reliability.
Yeah, that's the practical side.
So what happens when these ambitious vintage circuits start to, well, get old? Let's talk about the reality of owning one of these today.
Well, first off, the sources are pretty universal in praising the physical build quality.
Built like a tank.
Yeah, phrases like extremely well-built units with solid metal housing come up a lot. They were made sturdy. But like you said, the internal components, that's a different story after 40-plus years.
Capacitors drying out, things like that.
Exactly. You're dealing with circuits from the late 70s, early 80s, so potential issues. Degraded capacitors, maybe aging wiring becoming brittle, insulation on transformers breaking down, standard vintage gear stuff.
Right.
But there's also a specific, widely acknowledged technical challenge with the original Distortion II design. Some versions use an internal transformer.
A transformer inside the pedal for power.
Yeah, likely for power supply filtering or voltage conversion. An interesting choice back then. But that transformer could sometimes introduce audible hum, like 60-cycle hum noise into the signal chain.
Ah, the dreaded hum.
Especially when combined with older components and maybe less than ideal power situations.
Okay, that sounds like exactly the kind of problem the modding community would jump on immediately.
Oh, for sure.
We often hear about simple cap swaps on old pedals, but what we saw in the sources, it suggests the dedication to this circuit goes way beyond typical tweaks.
It goes much, much deeper. And the community's, I'd almost say, obsession really proves how special and maybe how tricky this circuit is to keep running perfectly.
So what are the common mods?
Well, you see mods specifically targeting that noise issue. Some people bypass the internal transformer altogether. Others add extra filter capacitors just for noise suppression.
Makes sense.
And you also see essential modern safety mods, like adding reverse polarity protection. You really don't want to fry these vintage circuits with the wrong power supply.
Definitely not. What's really fascinating, though, is the DIY community. Places like the Mad Bean forums, they have huge threads dedicated just to cloning this exact circuit.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They aren't trying to clone a simple distortion plus on. They are fixated on recreating that specific kind of exotic resonance behavior and that whole complex parallel clipping thing.
Exactly. And cloning it is apparently quite challenging technically. You need to accurately recreate that complex filtering network, that precise 55 hertz bandpass filter setup.
Not just sticking some diodes in.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And often, builders try to source specific older style components to get the saturation character just right. It's a serious analog simulation effort, really.
So the difficulty in even cloning it is kind of a testament to how unique the design was.
I think so. It demands a high level of skill from anyone trying to replicate it properly.
Yeah.
It shows how distinct it remains even today.
Okay, so pulling it all together then. Regardless of specific album credits or how much they sell for now, the real takeaway is pretty clear, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the core significance is this. The MXR Distortion II represents a major conceptual leap in how people thought about analog pedal design back in its day.
Let's crystallize that significance. What really makes it stand out in pedal history?
For me, it's that it was one of the absolute earliest analog pedals to deliberately try and model the acoustic interaction of a specific amp and speaker system, that whole 55 hertz G12M resonance thing.
It wasn't just generic distortion.
No, it was attempting to model an entire sonic environment. It was embedding the physical characteristics of a classic Marshall sec into the pedal's circuit design, long, long before digital modeling amps and IRs became a thing.
That's a fantastic way to synthesize it. The Distortion II, an early, maybe flawed, but brilliant analog attempt to capture complex acoustic physics in a little metal box.
Pretty much sums it up.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener, thinking about gear today? I've got a final thought for you to chew on. Knowing that the Distortion II used specific analog parts, capacitors, resistors, diodes, all carefully chosen to chase that 55 hertz resonant thump of a physical 4x12 cabinet, does that make an original MX142 somehow a more authentic analog speaker emulation than, say, a super advanced digital cabinet simulation modeler we have today?
Interesting question. Silicon versus simulation code.
Right. Think about the difference between capturing physics with physical components versus simulating those physics with software algorithms. Is one inherently more real than the other? Something to consider next time you plug in.
Definitely something to ponder.
Until next time, keep digging deep.